Hello there. Welcome to another mixed martial arts conversation for Sky Sports. We're looking ahead to UFC 271. Welcoming back the wonderful commentator extraordinary of MMA, journalist steeped in this, John Gooden, once again. John, great to see you. And we're keeping our fingers crossed, of course, further ahead that the UFC is back in London in March.
March 19th is the confirmed rumour. Tickets have been sold now. So, yeah, 2022 is looking much brighter for us fight fans over this part of the world to, of course, attend events and for me to work events. But if I'm speaking to you, that means we've got a big pay-per-view coming up imminently.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's look at Houston, Texas coming up this weekend. Israel Adesanya coming into this rematch against Robert Whittaker, looking, of course, to make it 2-0 against Whittaker. But he comes into it with the news breaking of a new contract with the UFC, multi-year contract. What does that say in terms of momentum for him, in terms of boost? What does it say about the clarity over his situation? Because perhaps a little bit of people have been worried that he's maybe a victim of his own success in that middleweight division in terms of there not being the narrative ahead in terms of matchups.
Yeah, I think that he sees that there will always be new blood coming through. The UFC moves so fast. That's definitely one thing that I've learned. We have people like Khamzat Chimaev that weren't with the organization a few years ago. And now you've got people that think he'll fare really well in a championship matchup. I'm not saying that that's necessarily something the UFC should give him right now, but that really is something that could, on paper, fall in his lap in a year or so, within the year. So he's had aspirations for middleweight as well. We've got new contenders coming up. Adesanya has spoken about fighting upper weight class. Of course, he tried. He had a failed bid, becoming a two-weight champion. That's still in his future as well. So plenty of scope for him to break more records and go on incredible runs and keep entertaining us fans into the future.
Yeah, just 32 years of age. You're steeped in the history of this sport. Where does he stand, do you feel, in the legacy of the middleweight division already?
Oh, he's right up there. I mean, Anderson Silva's the guy for me, though. He's the middleweight king. But I think Adesanya's on like a 10-fight win streak. From memory, I think Anderson Silva, hit about 13. But, he really did pull the sport up. He was a massive hero in Brazil. They were in a very strong spot at the time. Anderson was one of a number of champions that Brazil had turned out. So it was really great to see how the sport grew over there. But Adesanya is just, such an important figure, a crossover star as well, with his roots in Nigeria, of course, but then growing up and representing New Zealand, Australasia. He's a fantastic guy to have in our sport, which is not quite mainstream everywhere, but he does break through these boundaries as well. And I think he's a wonderful bloke to follow. Speaks very well. He's very cool, down with the kids and all that. So, yeah, it's great to have him.
Yeah, big fighter, wonderful character. When we talk about this fight, though, it's interesting, the sort of rivalry subtext as well. I think Whittaker, if I'm correct, was born in New Zealand, now is obviously Australian. So there's a lot of complexity in terms of national rivalry here as well, with New Zealand against Australia. But from Whittaker's perspective, he's talking about taking Adesanya down. For people who have just watched it, as I have, the first match back, he didn't try and take Adesanya down at all in that first one. He didn't shoot, got hit on the buzzer with the big right hand at the end of the first round, then stopped in the second when he was just, I guess, slower to the punch in terms of those exchanges. What do you think he can do better this time around to make it more comfortable for the champion?
Well, he came into that first fight all wrong. He was way too emotional. And these are his words, not my interpretation. I think there were like 57,000 in attendance in Australia there, which is just crazy, right? I think it's the biggest attended event that the UFC's had across its history. And Adesanya, because of the way that he is, he's a very, very good orator. And I think that he had that fight won before Whittaker had even stepped into the octagon, because he performed in a way that I wasn't used to seeing him. He was overreaching on everything. And with Adesanya being the incredible kickboxer that he is, and turned mixed martial artist, of course, he was just playing matador for a lot of it, and then took his time and obviously got those kill shots, if you like. So that we just need Whittaker to be more like himself. not get carried away in the emotion. He does have a good grappling game, which we don't often see him lean on. He's more of the guy who defends the wrestler and then answers back with his own striking. But I think that we saw Jan Blachowicz was a bigger man. He too is a black belt, and it's Adesanya said Robert Whittaker likes to copy other people's homework, but he's actually not that good at emulating it when it comes down to it. And it kind of is a little bit, even Whittaker said, easier said than done. But you are right. I think that taking this into a kind of multi-dimensional approach is a good way forward.
Yeah, it's interesting that as a template, isn't it? How realistic a template is Blachowicz's victory over Adesanya because of the sheer physics involved in terms of the size of Blachowicz?
No, I don't think so. When you go back to the Gracies in the early days of the UFC, it was a guy who was probably built very similar to me, and he was able to take out these monstrous people. Obviously, the sport has evolved now, and everyone's got skills everywhere. But that also means that those who favour and lean into an offensive wrestling or grappling approach, their skills are better as well. And it's chaining it together. This is where the elite distance themselves from the amateur guys. And that is their ability to take a fight from those striking exchanges and then close the distance in an effective way to get a hold of someone, to get it down to the mat, if indeed that's what they want to do. And then they can employ either, a submission attack or do damage. So it's the glue in between, and these guys are getting better and better at it all the time.
Of course, defeated fighter in a rematch, the intrigue is always there for them to make the adjustments and come back in. How do you see Adesanya's approach to it? Do you think it'll be similar in the sense that it'll be a watching brief early in the fight just to see what Whittaker's line of attack is?
I think he's a true martial artist, a man that came over from purely striking, and he's been learning the other elements. And I feel like, given his creativity and his personality type, I feel like he's probably enjoyed upskilling. He did say in a recent interview that he was getting a little bit, maybe a bit bored in some of the fights because they weren't really getting him going. And you spoke earlier about the fact that, where's the competition in the middleweight division for him right now? And therefore, what does that do to a champion's motivation? But he did say that he's come into this one with a fresher mindset. He's brought in some new sparring partners, a new striking coach to add different kinds of elements, like more taekwondo style kicks. So he's definitely trying to freshen things up. And I'm excited to see what new wrinkles he brings into this one too.
Yeah, I think we all are with that. In terms of, it's interesting you mentioning his comments, perhaps around his engagement and excitement. Are you concerned that could be an issue at all for him at some point if he's not feeling challenged enough?
The fact that he's been so honest about it means that I feel like he's gotten over it, certainly addressed it. Would he be signing a contract like he is now with the UFC if that was a genuine concern? So I don't think so. As I say, these styles make fights. Every opponent that you come up against gives you a fresh look. There's another fight on the card that could potentially be his next opponent as well. So he'll probably have an eye on that whilst he's warming up. So there's fresh meat for him, and I think he's the kind of guy who wants to break these records and give the real moments to the fans that are watching as well, because I know he's a showman. Yeah,
Jared Cannonier against Derek Brunson, is that where you see his path, or do you think the fabled fight against Kamaru Usman, the welterweight champ, could be in the reckoning?
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't heard what Adesanya has said about fighting Kamaru, because they are friends. They're, fellow country folk as well. So that one seems difficult. It's not a straightforward pairing, but when you look down and, Brunson is someone that's Adesanya beat, so maybe he wouldn't want to face him. But certainly if Jared Cannonier gets a win, then Adesanya has shown interest in wanting to, go toe-to-toe with him. We also saw Sean Strickland last week beat Jack Hermansson. He's had a steep rise recently as well. But I think if Cannonier comes out looking really, really good, then he will be next in line.
What do you think of the long-term options for him to go back to light heavyweight after what happened against Blachowicz? Is that on the reckoning? Of course, he didn't fully enlarge himself to the light heavyweight limit. I suppose there were lessons there that he reflected upon as well in terms of the adding of weight. Could you envisage him going back there as part of this new contract?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think he wants to be active. He's not happy fighting 2-3 times a year. I think he'd be preferably fighting 3-4 times a year. And if you jump up a weight, then it's not such a stress on your body. So I can see him doing that. But a big kind of concerted effort up at 205 might mean adding some mass. And I'm not sure whether that necessarily is something that Adesanya has fully figured out, just how it would affect his style. For example, he's a sharpshooter. You know, if he started getting big and bulky, what does that do to the way that he fights? So there's a couple of things that they would have to consider as a team, but his coach, Eugene Behrman's an absolute genius. So, I'd be interested to see what happens there. But yeah, I think we'll see him doing damage at both divisions.
Give us a prediction, if we can push you into one. How do you see Adesanya Whittaker 2?
I think it's going to be a great fight. So that's my prediction. I really do think that we're going to see a different Whittaker. He learned a very hard lesson in front of a lot of his people. When was it? In October 2019. He won't want to suffer that again. He has since gone away. He's put together 3 fantastic wins. He's looked like a completely different fighter to the man that turned up against Adesanya. And I think that's why Adesanya was on board with, or certainly his team were more on board with taking this rematch, because Whittaker looks ferocious. There was no other one that made sense to step in there with Adesanya right now. But Adesanya's the style bender. You know, he looks fantastic. He does stuff that we can only dream of as mere mortals. But, you know, we have seen a chink in his armor. Can Robert Whittaker capitalize and draw something out of Adesanya and maybe, you know, get that one back and set up a trilogy? That would be something.
It certainly would. Yeah, that would actually, the idea of a trilogy is fantastic, but a big weekend ahead coming up in Texas. And then we look forward as well beyond that, John, to hearing your dulcet tones on the microphone in London. Fingers crossed for that UFC showdown, March the 19th. Appreciate you coming on. Thank you for your time, John.
Pleasure is all mine. Good to speak to you.